organizations that help bring about change in our society. And we believe that professional sports teams are soccer teams, rugby teams, cricket teams, teams that are well known internationally and nationally. Now, what I'll be basically talking about as this first speaker is the whole nature of charitable organizations and how sport is influential and why we believe it should be used as an upliftment of charitable organizations in our country. And my second speaker will be talking about the benefits versus the harms of implementing this formation. Now, one thing I would like to get clear to sign a position that we're not saying non-charitable organizations should not be promoting their products. We say sport should not be a legitimate platform for them to promote these products. We say sport should be used as means for charitable organizations to uplift their products in order to get more help into changing and uplifting our whole society. Now, to move on to my point of nature of charitable organizations. First, ladies and gentlemen, we have to look at and understand what is charity. Charity is giving back, and giving about change in our society. They promote social welfare and community development. Why we believe social welfare and community development are so important? Because they change society and they strive to eradicate the social ills such as poverty. We believe that is why they're so important. We believe that is why we have to promote these charitable organizations in our sports teams. Now, currently, as we've seen, the government is facing a huge burden on delivering services. And we see these countless strikes, such as the ones in Kaicha. We believe that the health and safety and education of our people is at jeopardy, as the government is finding it hard to maintain everyone in our country. And we believe by putting in this charitable organization only in our sportsmen jerseys and sportsmen teams, then in that way we are able to promote that particular change, as we've seen how influential sportsmen and sports teams are. And we believe that organizations such as the UNICEF specifically play a very vital role in our society, as they help in closing the social ills that we see in our country. And how do they close the social ills? Now, they sponsor shelter, orphanage homes, and they help bring about change in our society that we need. We've seen them creating these orphanage homes for children living in streets. We've seen them creating soup kitchens for people who are really in need and in need of their needs to be delivered. And we believe that they sponsor what the society actually needs. They give the society what they need, and they are able to eradicate that gap that the government is failing to do. And we, as side opposition, believe this is a good thing, and this is something that we should keep on doing. Yes, sir.
Policy question. Will charities that are going to be featured on sports team jerseys have to pay for their featuring, or will it be for free?
Now, charitable organizations, as we know, they are the organizations that are there for people in our communities, right? So they won't have to pay. They won't have to pay for their own budgets to be in there. They won't have to pay large amounts of money, because they are the ones that are in need of that kinds of sponsorship. They are the ones that are in need of this money. They are the ones that will help bring about change in our society. Now, to look at sports themselves, we believe that sports themselves are also social upliftment, and they go hand in hand with the aims of charitable organizations, as they are also about bringing about change in society and changing our society. So we believe sports themselves are the legitimate body, have the right ones to go about this mission. Now, looking at the whole point of sport, how is sport influential? We believe that sport is an influential thing, as it unites everyone and everyone relates to it. We believe that people look up to the players Now, as side opposition, we've proven to you how influential these sports teams are, and these sports players are, and we believe that that particular influence is something that will help people to give back. It's something that will help bring back the spirit of Ubuntu. It's something that will bring back charity and will influence people to give back to their communities and help in eradicating the social ills that we have. Now, my second speaker is going to come in and tell you why we should promote this motion and why the benefits of this motion eradicate the harms that this motion comes up with. And with all those words, I beg to propose.
Thank that speaker and call on the first speaker of opposition here.
There probably is quite a lot of poverty in the world. In fact, most can agree there is. We agree charity organizations do a lot of good, and we also agree that sports teams are in the public sphere. What we don't agree with is one, that allowing sports teams to advertise and create an obligation is an obligation which one exists at all. Secondly, we don't agree that forcing sports teams will be in the best interest of the sport, first being all, but secondly will actually be in the interests of advertising companies. In fact, we feel as though it's going to harm it. And thirdly, we feel as though by implementing this policy, we're not actually going to get the charity which side opposition actually hopes to aim for. But we also found a number of other problems with the case which we're going to identify, primarily problems with policy. We think that side opposition has failed to clarify on the issue of who is going to be implementing this policy. They haven't told us whether or not it's going to be a government agency who's going to be implementing this on the side of government, or whether or not it's going to be an international sports body, such as FIFA or the International Rugby Organization either. And neither will they tell us why this needs to be an absolute policy as well. Why does it need to be only charitable organizations which need to be on sporting and advertising, and whether or not it's going to ensure how many of these companies are going to be, especially since there's no incentive for sports teams to have multiple or even have any proper representation of these companies, seeing as they make no actual profit from having charitable organizations on their jerseys. So the main contention which we have on the side of proposition, a lot of it actually integrates with our positive matter quite physically. So I'm going to be addressing the first issue, the idea of this moral obligation, whether or not we have an obligation as sports teams to actually have these teams on our jerseys. So let's look at the first instance. We feel as though they took the soft line in today's debate. They said, look, these sports teams will receive no profits and will not expect any kind of money compensation in order to have these teams on their jerseys. Firstly, we feel that it opens up a their case. The problem which this opens up is it forces charity organizations to compete over who's on these jerseys in a way which isn't based on money. We feel as though this opens up problems, firstly because we create an arbitrary distinction as to which charity organizations are going to be chosen by these various teams. But secondly, we feel as though it opens up, of course, where we can open up a huge amount of corruption and bribes within the sport in order for charity organizations to ensure that they get this free advertising in the first place. Secondly, we feel as though there's a huge moral issue which is opened up when you start forcing private organizations, private individuals to act on the behalf of state and start fulfilling the state's burdens. We feel as though that the teams themselves are compromised of private individuals who are all self-interested and rational. We feel as a result, by forcing them to have these charity organizations on their jerseys, we feel as though that you're using these players, you're using these teams as objects to social change. And by objectifying these teams, you're undermining the dignity of not only the teams and the players, but we feel as though the larger sporting community as well, particularly fans as well, as you're using their teams as objects towards social change and not respecting their dignity, which we feel as though they deserve. Secondly, we feel as though along this line, just because they are in a position to do good, means they have no actual obligation to do good. We think when you look at these organizations themselves, not only are they huge contributors in terms of the economy, in terms of raising fans, in terms of providing for their communities entertainment, particularly low-income communities, when we look at sports like soccer, which are incredibly popular around the world. But we feel that many of these organizations already pay tax and that way contribute and fulfill their burden to society in that way. And to expect a larger burden, we feel as though that there needs to be a particular instance, and they still need to prove why there needs to be a far greater burden on these organizations above tax. But assuming we're not conceding this, we feel as though in many cases this burden is already satisfied. We feel as though that many sporting teams commit to various charity works. If you look at Tottenham Hotspurs, they donate hundreds of millions a year towards various charity outfits. And when we look at the South African Springbok rugby team, they engage in many different charitable outreaches by engaging the community in various different ways. And that way, we feel as though there's no specific instance, assume we're not assuming that they have this kind of burden, that one, it should be fulfilled in this particular way, or two, that it's not already being fulfilled in some way or another already. But lastly, we have a third moral objectification on this level, which is to say that why do these, assume not conceding that they have this obligation, why particularly are we looking at sporting teams which have their jerseys? We think, why don't we look at the television companies that broadcast the sport, in which there are far greater outreach, we feel as though. But secondly, why is it particularly sporting teams? We think there are many other aspects of society of huge amount of outreach, but we don't have the same obligation on them to do it. So to simply say because you're in the right position is not satisfactory in proving why they have an obligation in order to do this. So let's look at the next point. Is it best in the interests of sport? We think that if side proposition aim to implement this policy and it forces either collapse the sport or actually undermines the sport itself, we feel as though this is going to be actively undermining the sport and is unfair expectation to be asking of these sporting bodies, to be asking of these teams, and to be asking from individuals and the fans themselves. If you look at sporting teams around the world, particularly in soccer and the Premier League, most sporting teams in fact run at a loss because of the highly competitive nature of these teams. We've seen a huge growth in recent years since the 90s in the sport because of advertising. In fact, the entire growth of professional sport relies on the money they can gain from advertising itself. When you remove this advertising, you remove a substantial amount of capital which they use in order to compete. The problem which we have is many clubs at the moment are tied into contracts and legal obligations in order to satisfy players' needs, in order to satisfy coaches and the various benefactors who rely on these teams in order to make a living, in order to provide for their families, or just be compensated for the hard work and competitive and risky environment in which they play. We think when all of a sudden you start cutting a method of advertising from these teams, we think so you create a huge amount of instability in these companies who have huge obligations to pay. And in fact, this could lead not only detriment them, but in fact it collapses the sport, especially against the amount of debt which these companies rock up each year. But lastly, we feel when you look at the type of advertising which charities require advertising which compels people to compelling advertising in terms of charity organizations relies on evoking an emotional response in people who are likely to donate. This emotional response doesn't happen when you see a small little logo of UNICEF in a jersey. This happens when you see a video, when you see a picture of the type of people you're advertising towards, the type of people you will be giving this money towards. We think when you advertise in a particular way by putting these logos on jerseys, it's an ineffective way of advertising because you don't effectively meet the goals which charity organizations rely upon. And as a result, you're not only harming them, you're harming these teams and all their benefactors for marginal gains which would otherwise be sought perhaps better under obligation. So as a result, we feel as though the side opposition have a lot to prove under their shaky case, and that's why we are proud to oppose, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
We thank that speaker and call on the second speaker of proposition here.
In the current status quo, we've seen the South African Brewers when they wanted to sponsor the South African cricket team. But because Hashim Amla was religion, was into alcohol, we've seen how that has an impact in the team and how that has an impact in the society because it was told that it was big-headed and so whatever. We do not want a brand that is not going to accommodate everyone. We want a brand that is for the people and by the people. We want a brand that is going to accommodate everyone. Those are the brands that we want in our society that are about for change, not the ones that are going to contradict with what people believe. So basically, let us go into what has happened in today's debate. There was this whole issue on moral obligation and the nature of advertisement and moral obligation. So they feel side opposition came to the House of and told us that they don't think that we should be compelling these people and that why necessary sport. Ladies and gentlemen, but the fact that we are South African citizens, we think that we are automatically all South Africa, automatically all South Africa to do something for them. And we think that it is not something that is even going to benefit society at large, and it is even going to benefit yourself at large. So we don't think that in that way we are even compelling them in a wrong way. And for example, obviously when you see a water leakage, even though you know that it is not a problem, you automatically feel the bad into actually go and report it as you're part of a South African citizen. So we think those are the basic things that as a South African citizen you don't even have to question about, as long as they bring upon benefits and they bring upon change that they're going to benefit you, no Rahul. Also, they say that okay, if we actually take this organization, charitable organization, there's going to be competition and challenges. We need to be realistic here. Team Western Cape is actually lying here. We don't think that if these people are for change, they are going to do any competition, because basically it doesn't really matter if it is UNICEF or it doesn't really matter if it is any organization, as long as it is an organization that is going to bring change. What we rather think as side opposition, we rather think that the brands that are going to be having competition are brands such as Nike, are brands such as Adidas, because they are for the profit. But we don't think that brands that value of advertisement. Secondly, firstly, we think that we're not saying Nike is no longer going to advertise. We're saying Nike is going to advertise, but not in the jersey of the South Africans. So now this is not a case where we're disturbing. So now this is not a case when we're actually saying Nike is not going to advertise or Adidas. They are going to advertise, not in the jersey. And I will furthermore prove in my speech why we don't think that they should be advertising in the jersey. And secondly, we're not even stopping the other organizations. So we think that the value of advertisement is not losing today's debate. So I will take it a step. So in conclusion to my rebuttals, what I'm saying is that before that it is necessary for us to obligate these people to wear this, because at the current status quo they are already wearing these two badges. We find out in most of their t-shirts they have both of them. But what we strive for as our proposition, we don't want them to have both badges. And I will further prove more when I talk about benefits versus harms. Yes, sir.
If it is true that sports teams are so incredibly influential, then can you please tell me why, bearing in mind that under the status quo sports teams do donate to charity, fans don't already become sports teams that donate to charities? It is true that sports teams are so incredibly influential, then bear in mind that they already donate to charities under the status quo. Why don't fans already copy the sports teams that donate to the same charities?
So the thing that now, in the current status quo, yes, we acknowledge that they are already giving out. And then we think that now it becomes a problem when they see two badges, because now they are actually confused whether or not should they go along and promote the other one of the charitable organization, or should they go along with the other one. So I think that it will be more easy for people when they see one badge that is actually for the people, for the whole people. So moving on to my positive matters, I'll be talking about benefits versus harms. Ladies and gentlemen, we understand that sport people are people that are influential. We've seen in the current status quo how our best player, Messi, has been signed by Adidas, how Messi has influenced a lot of people. People have been more likely to like soccer or whatever. So I think that if we were using people like Messi to actually advertise this sort of organization, then it is more likely for people to donate. It is more likely for people to see this as a moral obligation for them to donate. So I think that with that, we're coming with a lot of benefits. So let us look at the whole issue of benefits. So we think that now, if we let this charitable organization to be on the badge A, we think that, okay, first of all, it is more likely for people to actually support that. And secondly, we think that now, more actually as South Africa, for people who feel, okay, as South Africa, as people who feel that Adidas makes them to be seen inferior as they can't afford it and so whatever, now they will see that this is no longer a case where people who are playing soccer are the only people who can actually afford this. They will see that, okay, everyone is accommodated, everyone can be part of those things. And secondly, we think that if we were going to go with the current status quo, this will come with a lot of harms. What are those harms? Firstly, we think that if you're going to have Adidas and all of those things, Adidas are working for themselves, and they are profit, they work for profit. They're not. It is less likely for them to go to the society and come back and give back to the society, and that's what we don't want. As we've seen that our government is currently struggling in the current status quo. So what we want is that we want this charitable organization to work with the government to eradicate the harms that already occur in the current status quo. And
We thank that speaker and call on the second speaker of opposition here.
Ladies and gentlemen, to summarize their case, what they told us is that these institutions are incredibly influential. And because they're incredibly influential, they have a duty. Basically, in summary, they said it's a good end, therefore it justifies the means. My brother has already responded to them, telling you why we don't think that's a legitimate means, why we don't impose this duty on them. Secondly, what I'm going to be extending on and presenting you to in my positive matter is another concept, which is we don't achieve the ends. So the first thing is what we said is that it's nice that they have no duty. But furthermore than that, what we said is even if they do have that duty, they're fulfilling it already. And we said it's in two regards. One, like other institutions, they pay tax, and that tax the government uses to promote social welfare. Secondly, what we say is out of their own goodwill, they naturally donate. Now, to do with the basic premise of that argument is influence, right? How they influence people. And they give the example of an Adidas brand. But what we'd say is, if you look at the nuance of the argument, right, there's a disjunct. What we'd say is that Adidas is effective because people associate sports and the sports players. And so they buy into the brand because they're trying to emulate Messi and his great sporting potential. We don't see they buy into him because he's a great moral character or he's virtuous. And so the disjunct between his exposure and him buying the brand isn't made, and so we think that's falls to our side. The second thing I'm going to contest is this idea that brands are neutral. They're just not. What we'd say is there are many different organizations with many different causes. We see charitable organizations in America both pro and against abortion. So what we'd say is, yes, it's a very competitive market. But furthermore, within the market, what we'd say is very competitive because what we'd say is there are many organizations trying to do the same thing, trying to promote AIDS, welfare, and that sort of thing, trying to cure cancer. And so we see competition in that regard. And so we do get this kind of race to the top, or them trying to get on a jersey. But furthermore, what we'd say is teams have relative different amounts of exposures, and so there'll be a race to get onto the most flashy team, Arsenal as opposed to Wigan. So the last thing I'm going to bring to you is about what we want to do in terms of real change. I have 5 pieces of positive matter after that. The first thing is about this accountability mechanism. And what we'd say is that when we put branding of charitable organizations onto these sports players, consumers now view those teams as moral agents, right? And so they don't hold them as accountable to doing moral things within their society. And that's where you get the superficial change where, wow, we look so cool, we're supporting UNICEF, rather than them donating to